welcome. We're back to where she has to sit on 5 pillows to feel like she's more important than me.
I'm tall again.
You have a Napoleon complex.
I need my, what's that called? Princess and the Pea pillow.
A booster seat.
Yes. Yep.
What's that called? A booster? You don't know basic
booster
terms?
chair. Booster chair. Yeah.
Is so small you don't know what a booster seat is. Welcome everybody. Today we're doing a little bit of a different film analysis. We haven't done anything. Why is this all? Scoot over. Okay.
This way?
Scoot up.
Okay.
And scoot over. Get in the middle.
Here we are.
We've not done a lot of film noir yet, so let's get into it. We wanted to do the villain Joker archetype because we realized as we were watching some of these old noir films that you can't really have the modern villains that you have today without some of these predecessors in film, right?
Yeah.
And you also did a book report that we'll talk about that overlapped because you went into Anton LaVey's life, not because you're interested in that, but because you wanted to see the worldview that he had, and since he was in many ways influential in pop culture, what were the Hollywood things that he found relevant for his philosophy, and then what movies and shows reflect the philosophy of his system, right?
Yeah.
His idea of basically a kind of social Darwinism, which we'll get into.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that a little bit first. We'll talk about your live stream that you did on Rockfin, which we'll promote here in a second. But
part of the aesthetic that he had in the Church of Satan was taken from German Expressionism.
Yes.
And film noir, which he loved.
Is influenced by that.
Yeah, and just the theatrical performance part of the rituals that he would do.
Dramaturgy.
Yes.
Liturgy and drama is dramaturgy.
Self-transformative psychodrama. So the dramas are very important, even going back to the beginning of drama, which I talk about in my talk, our live talk that we're going to be doing in LA. But so he was popular during the 60s and 70s when horror was popping off, and a lot of yes, a lot of that drew from film noir, expressionism, early horror movies. And like you said, you can totally see when an actor is influenced by a very old movie or a classic age actor, right? So
you look very bright and shiny here, like an internet angel woman.
Okay.
And you're covering that here in your Rockfin, right?
Yeah. Satan is not going anywhere in pop culture unless we just...
Can we do Mystery Science Theater on ourselves, and you can sit here and comment and riff on you?
Okay.
I'm joking. Here, I'm going to give, if you guys want to support Jamie, you can follow her on her streams right here in the super chat. And go ahead.
So he influenced a lot of horror movies from that era. Everybody knows about Rosemary's Baby.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a quote here if you want me to read it. It says, "No occultist has had a direct an impact upon formulaic cinematic presentations of Satanism as has Anton LaVey. Ritual and esoteric symbolism are central elements in LaVey's church, and the film in which he has had a hand contain detailed portrayals of satanic rites and are filled with traditional occult symbols." So we watched a bunch of those today. Not today.
You mean over the last week? And then we did one today. We reviewed Psycho.
Yeah.
And M, we'll be talking about M too. So you said then that he listed a bunch of characters that and people in films that really reflect his philosophy.
Yeah.
And it's not just the we're going to do like the normal kind of villain first, the classic Darwinian, self-interested, screw the world kind of villain, and then we're going to transition over into the psycho. So we'll be talking about archetypal villains that are sociopaths, psychopaths, and then the pure chaotic evil Joker archetype. So we found some interesting figures in old films that I did not expect we would see. I didn't think that you could find rich symbolism in a lot of these 40s era films. So you kind of have to go back to a little bit of the 30s era, which we'll do when we get to Fritz Lang's M. But which one do you want to... Well, why don't you mention the films that he mentions, and then we'll talk about why he thought those were interesting, and then the ones that we chose.
Well, he loved the hoodlum anti-hero that was also kind of sincere, which he felt sympathy for the devil in certain ways. So he loved the original Scarface, M, Scarlet Street, The Harder They Fall, The Asphalt Jungle, and The Gangster, which he says opens and ends with a satanic statement. And that one's really hard to watch. We tried to find it, but we couldn't.
Yeah, the idea here is that I am an individual. I am not under any constraints. A very libertarian anarcho-individualism that we find echoed in a lot of these figures, and that, as you pointed out, does go back to the archetype of Satan in the garden, because his whole program is, according to Milton, better to reign in heaven than to better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven.
Yeah.
And I think Milton comes up cited in one or two of the films. I think he's cited in Seawolf, because the captain, played by Edward G. Robinson, who has an interesting dark past that we'll talk about. Well, dark connections, I should say, particularly to the Black Dahlia. He embodies this satanic rebellion, revolution in himself as this weird sea captain that basically just sits and reads lit all day and tortures his crew.
Well, Edward G. Robinson was one of his favorite actors because he played this character over and over again. Like you said, the captain...
Anton LaVey's favorites.
Yeah. The captain in Seawolf, and that's a book by Jack London.
Right.
Who... What were you going to say about him?
We're going to get to his socialism in a minute.
Okay, well, we can do that now.
Well, we got to go through the different... I wanted you to list the movies
some more movies. Seawolf, Key Largo, Hell on Frisco Bay, The Night Has 1,000 Eyes, which is another one that was hard to find.
Yeah, we're trying to find that one.
Nightmare Alley, which they made the remake with Bradley Cooper.
Yeah, I did a podcast on Nightmare Alley if you missed that one, because there's a lot of symbolism and connection to the circus, the idea of the freak show. The freak show and the circus come up in a lot of ways in literature, particularly in Southern Gothic. They make quite a bit of an appearance, and I'll be covering that when I do Wise Blood in the coming week or two. So we'll be done with it here in a little bit. It's not a very long read, but it has a lot of symbolism in it. And actually, Anton LaVey, for whatever reason, found curious parallel with this. Now, Flannery O'Connor, if you don't know, is the most famous, along with Faulkner, of the Southern Gothic writers, and she was a committed Catholic. She read the Summa Theologica of Aquinas every day, and would sort of load her humorous short stories with all kinds of deep symbolism. So there's a lot of esoteric stuff. There's a lot of Jansenist themes. I had to write a grad paper on all of her short stories. I read all of her short stories in college. I had to write a grad paper on it. So I remember a lot of that in terms of like dualism, Manichaeanism. Basically all of that stuff comes up in her stuff. But in Wise Blood, it's going to be it's prophetic, because she's basically predicting the new atheists. So she has this character who's the new atheist before the new atheists, and he starts the Church of Jesus without Jesus, and he goes on this quest to basically create a Christless religion that he runs. So he's basically starting a cult. She wrote that in 1949, which is, again, way ahead of the times in terms of the new atheism. But why did Anton like this? It's a film version too, by the way, with Brad Dourif.
Because he grew up working in the carnival.
Oh yeah,
and
the
being
carnival
a lion
barker.
tamer, and
Carnival
this
barker,
is where he learned that people are easily conned, and that he was aligned with the intelligent people who were the con men. So there's two types of people in his paradigm: the dupes and the dupers, and that is also like Colonel Tom, Elvis's handler, the snowmen, right? So everybody has their weaknesses, and he tried to teach people how to read them so that you can con them, and that's a big part of his church.
That's why it's called wise blood, right? Wise blood it's symbolic for those that are not stupid, right? We're smart enough. We don't fall for the Jesus religion like those other people. And that's exactly what Anton LaVey thought of himself, right? Mm-hmm. And it also is the term that mobsters and gangsters use to be a wise guy, meaning that you're not like the norming you're not a working stiff, because you realize the system is rigged, so you're going to go against the system because the system is just another criminal structure, right? Exactly. So that's a wise guy. That's why they're talking about having wise blood, and they're not fooled. But the irony is, throughout the novel, she has Hazel Motes essentially getting, and even Enoch Emery getting demonically possessed as the novel progresses. But why did you say he liked it?
He liked Wise Blood?
Yeah.
Because of the cult aspect.
Oh, so it's kind of like the Church of Satan prior to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because his group is quasi-atheistic, right?
Right.
Yeah.
He loved The Great Flammarion and The Great Gabos, so 2 more movies about magicians.
And The Great Flammarion has Eric von Stroheim, who plays the cab driver husband butler to Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah, that's another one that was in his collection. Treasure of Sierra Madre.
Because of the greed.
He loved Vincent Price and Peter O'Toole in the movie called The Ruling Class, which looks really weird. For visuals, for the proper satanic visuals, he liked The Black Cat, and The Seventh Victim is an example of the way that Satanists behave. And then there was the last movie I wrote down was The Brotherhood of Satan, Children Being Inhabited by Dying Satanists.
Yeah, so kind of a reincarnation idea. That movie is terrible, like not in a moral sense, but it's just unwatchable. It's really no good. We got about 20 minutes into it and turned it off just because you can't even watch it. But we're also going to be covering another novel that fits in with this idea of confidence man, and that's the Melville Confidence Man, because this is really deep novel. It's hard to explain it, but it's basically a bunch of rascals on a steamboat, and they're all a bunch of different con men, and it's con men conning con men, and who's the real con man? And ultimately, it's kind of the devil, right? The devil's kind of the ultimate con man.
That's part of film noir too.
Yeah.
And there's always some kind of insurance scam going on, or they think that that's what's happening in a lot of those black and white.
Well, a lot of the guys are insurance investigators investigating scams and frauds.
Yeah.
There's always a femme fatale. There's always really contrasted white and dark lighting. There's always, a hard-boiled detective of some kind. There's blinds. You gotta have blinds in a
broads with gams.
Femme fatale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
well, she can't be a broad. She can't be a femme fatale. She's not. She doesn't have gams. So that goes with the territory. No such thing as a non-gam femme fatale.
Girls got gams.
By the way, if you guys would hit like and share, it's civic holiday. Are all the Americans partying on their steamboats? They're out there with the confidence men, carnival barkers. So, and that's the thing that Anton LaVey was really into, because he saw religion as really just a bunch of carnival barkers, right?
Well, he also saw the revival tent preachers that would come.
And they were fraudsters.
Yeah, and they were openly with the carnies, just part of the show. And they were on the lowest totem pole because nobody liked them, and they call them lot lice.
Like a lot lizard.
Yeah, yes. But tinier and just in your hair.
Wait, lot lice?
Yeah. So the Jesus Carnival tent preachers, revival preachers of the carnivals.
What does a lot lice mean?
That's what they called them. Because they were like vermin, because they were the lowest of the low, because they're using religion to scam people.
I see. So here is a documentary that we're going to be doing soon that's kind of a classic. It's a lot of people know this documentary. It won awards, and it's about this guy, Marjo, if you don't know, who was a faith healer guy that got exposed, or eventually, I don't know, maybe he exposed himself, right, as eventually being a fraud, and he came out and admitted it. And you'll see what we mean, because this fits into what we're talking about today. So when he thinks of church, right, he thinks of these people.
Get meetings, or you don't get booked back unless you have a gimmick. Whereas the evangelists say it's a ministry. It's incredible. They'll say, oh, brother so-and-so, he's got the ministry of laying on of hands, or he's got the ministry of prophecy. But that's a gimmick, and the guys that have the gimmicks get the big meetings and do good.
Oh, glory, glory, oh, hallelujah, since I lay my burden down. Oh, thank you, Jesus. Oh, thank you, Jesus. Right there at the age of 4, I had a decision to make. And I said, yes, Lord, I will.
Thank you, loving God.
Hallelujah. And I dedicated my life to God. Praise the Lord. That night when she went home, that cancer had dissolved and run completely down her face. She was healed by the power of God. And the only thing that was left was a little irritation mark of little pink skin, but the skin was new like a baby. Hallelujah. Only because she believed. Hallelujah.
When I would go to a pastor's church where I hadn't preached before, and they'd sort of look me over and wonder, what was I really going to say? What was I really like? And I'd sort of have to just cool it till I got up on the platform and they saw that I did say all the things they wanted to hear.
Would some of you get out $5 or $10? Bring what you would for Jesus tonight. Come on.
I can't really think of a time that I ever believed in God or and I've ever thought that it was a miracle of God that I preached. I don't think, even with all the people gathering around me, thousands of people saying this has to be a miracle, surely, God has called you and all that. I don't think with all that, I just, knew that I could do it well, and my parents had trained me, but I never really tripped out and thought that I was some real miracle child of any kind. I think nowadays people have seen so much, see so much happen, they can tell one of these shysters when they come through, because they've heard everything, They'll listen a couple nights, and they won't say anything, but they can tell after a while.
Yeah, they're not dumb. People are intelligent nowadays.
Right. There's one guy that gets into it so heavy that he prophesies, and he told me how he did it. He sat he looked right across the table back and forth at me, and he told me how he confiscates money. He says he's on this station, it's over 40 states, and he'll go on there and he'll get on the radio and he'll say, I know that listening to my little voice tonight, that there's some lady out there and you've got $10 put away in a cookie jar. Now God spoke to my heart and told me to go and tell you to get that $10 and get it in the mail and send it to me, and God will bless you. God will give you a reward such as you have never known before. And then he comes back to me and he tells me, he says, if you're on the radio and you're going over 40 states and you're on at prime time, you've got thousands of people listening, the chances are that there are at least 200 or 300 little old ladies who've got a $10 bill in a cookie jar. And so if you even get,
Ooh, pay piggy.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, totally.
He was getting pay piggies the shyster way. I don't approve of this method of pay piggying.
A couple hundred go over and get it and send it to you. That's $2,000 that you've made just like that. And so, if you're going to get into big time religion, this is the games you've got to play, things like that. You go into it as a business and you work it as a business,
As they make their way up into the upper room, oh, hallelujah, they shut the windows, they lock the doors for fear of their lives. But I see them as they got down on their knees and they began to pray. And I see the Holy Ghost as cloven tongues of fire were upon them, hallelujah. And oh my, the Holy Ghost finally found a permanent resting place. What do you want God to do for you? He's going to do it right now. Hallelujah. Say thank you, Jesus. In Jesus' name.
Speak it out, till all of a sudden standing there, they're not saying anything. Then after a while, about 4 or 5 more will gather around and they'll start doing the same thing. Come on, speak it out, till all of a sudden the person will,
He's wearing a tie-dye.
He looks like Richard Simmons.
He looks like Bill Walton mixed with Richard Simmons mixed with Matthew McConaughey with that curly hair. He's sweating to the oldies while he's smoking a doobie while he's right.
I think you should do the next level of impressions called fusions.
Fusions, yeah, that's good.
Matthew McConaughey as Richard Simmons.
He's that's too hard but he's meeting cool people. And wait, what is it?
New people.
He's doing new things. Meeting new people, do cool things. That's what old Marjo's up to. Old Marjo's over there doing cool things.
Get so overwhelmed by the thing that they start going, you know, and the next thing, that's it, you've got it. Like they feel good. We got another one, you know.
Tremendous. He's a
What? Peter Schiff showed up. What's he doing there?
born preacher. He's just a preaching machine. But it's an miracle of God. He is the hand of God upon him, no question about it.
Thank you, sweet Jesus.
I mean, if I was going to pick a religion of
There's a specific point I'm trying to go to where he throws all the money out. That's what I'm looking for. Look at his records. He's got like Doobie Brothers over there.
And he's got a waterbed.
A waterbed.
Awesome.
you know, Christian type religion, that I had to go into one of them. I mean, thank God I don't have to, but if I had to go into one of them, I would, you know, pick the Pentecostal faith, because some of the churches, the music is just great, and the people are interesting, you know, they're kind of weird, and it's okay, you know, it's...
I want every head bowed and every eye closed. Hallelujah. I just want to see the hands tonight.
Are they white as
There we go.
snow? Thank you, Jesus. Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb?
Oh, hallelujah.
So there we go. I just wanted to go to the part where he's throwing out that big fat wad of cash on the hotel bed. Anyway, that's a famous documentary from the 70s, and it fits perfectly with the characters in Wise Blood, and it fits perfectly with the characters in Confidence Man by Melville, and it fits perfectly with all the stuff that LaVey was talking about as his exposure to Christianity, right?
This is what turned him to Satanism. This kind of witnessing these type of characters.
Yeah, in other words, if religion is just a bunch of hucksters and shysters and rascals, right?
Yeah.
Then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you do. So, was there any more movies that he thought were really important embodying these archetypes?
He was involved in Rosemary's Baby, which they had recruiting posters for the Church of Satan at the premiere of Rosemary's Baby in the theater. Did you know that?
Well, no, but I've heard that people say that it wasn't true that he consulted, but actually I think it is true.
Well, he was in... He has an IMDb. There's two... I can't remember where I wrote that down, but he was, like, in 2 movies. Also, he was friends with Kenneth Anger. Mm-hmm. He met Marjorie Cameron.
Well, I mean, he was hanging around, and didn't he... He's with Jay Mansfield, and he's hanging out with Sammy Davis Jr., and... So, I mean, he's hanging out with Hollywood people. It's not implausible.
He had a love affair with Marilyn Monroe when they were both young.
Oh, that's right. You read that in that biography, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he said, he predicted that she was going to be the satanic Madonna of the 20th century.
Yes. And he also talked about that. He was talking about sex bots way before anybody else.
Oh, heck yeah. We're going to do a whole nother show on Rockfin just on that part.
Well, I think that he was in the circles of people in power and people who knew, you know, and there was a connection too with organized crime. That is covered in the article I sent you. Do you remember that?
Yeah. So the first people that were joining this church were like baronesses and lawyers and doctors and San Francisco elite, not goth kids in the basement listening to Tool. Mm-hmm. Right?
So here you see this article I was talking about. The FBI, the mob, Satanism, Satan, FBI. You can't see the whole title, but here it is. I'll put it in the chat for you. And this gets into Ted Kennedy, ironically.
Oh, yeah, Devil's Reign. I think that's one he was in.
Okay. But this article gets into the Satan, the FBI, the mob, the forgotten plot to go after Ted Kennedy. So the Kennedys are besieged not just by the CIA, but also by the pseudo-occultists, because Anton LaVey's group is not, I mean, they're kind of occultists, but they also don't really believe in the supernatural things, right?
Not really, but he did believe in different dimensions and spirits in other planes of existence.
So, but it's kind of like it's like a buffet style, right? Like he
Yeah.
picks and chooses, but he's not invoking an actual entity. And to what degree is he an atheist? Right? He doesn't believe there's a God, right?
Don't try and make sense of it because you can't.
Yeah.
So you just kind of have to report what they were.
But does he have a
thinking.
system?
Well, his system is atheistic, yeah, and that you just worship yourself.
Yeah.
And Satan is the representation of the anti-God within you. or
He
something.
becomes an archetype of the individual and self-worship.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but then other groups, like supposedly, I don't know how serious even Aquino was about, but supposedly that's theistic Satanism, where there is an actual entity, right? Mm-hmm. Supposedly. Although I don't know if Aquino really believed that or not, but
I think he did. He was big on Set and Egyptian, and they're trying to contact things from other dimensions.
yeah, well, certainly more likely. But I just mean that these military people, you can never know that. I mean, they're trained liars. People that work in military
yeah.
intelligence, the Central Intelligence, they're just liars. Mm-hmm. So you can never really know if what they're telling you is the real philosophy that they have, right? Because all the people that graduated and come out of the Crowleyan schools, right, if you remember, right, they're all learning to create their own cults. That's what Crowleyanism is. It teaches you to create your own cult, to be your own god.
Exactly. And he would have no problem if everything he said was BS, because that's part of the con, and that's the root of his philosophy.
Yeah, exactly. So these things are not antithetical. Let's talk, you want to, about Seawolf first?
Okay, yeah.
Let's get into that, because this was a fun one that I wasn't familiar with. It's written by Jack London. I've not read the book, and I didn't even know it was a Jack London story until, we started watching the film. Everybody's, I'm sure, familiar with the one with, the Disney movie that is based on the
Call of the Wild?
Call of the Wild, yeah.
Yeah.
With Ethan Hawke, remember that?
Yeah.
I grew up with that era. So this stars Edward Gene Robinson, if you don't know, is kind of a staple of the 1930s and 40s gangster and noir dark crime thrillers, and he usually plays this kind of a character. Now, sometimes he's the protagonist who's kind of swept up in things that he doesn't deserve to be swept up in. But we'll watch some of this trailer. But guys, by the way, if you guys would hit like and share, also support the show via the super chats if you want to get into some discussions of archetypes in noir. What were you gonna say?
Since we're talking about Edward G. Robinson, this book says that he was the inspiration for the remember that devil in Fantasia, the Chernobog they call him, was supposed to be based on him.
In real life, or his character? Speak up.
Just his likeness and his character.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, he's always parodied in the Bugs Bunnies too, together with Peter Lorre. Mm-hmm. Right. You'll never get me, cop up. See? And then Peter Lorre's always portrayed, right? Reek.
Yeah.
Help me, Reek.
Do Sidney Greenstreet.
I can't do him. Why are you? I can't.
It-
He's just a big fat guy.
Yeah, he just like Blvd. Yeah.
Oh, you mean his laugh? Okay, yeah. I was like, I can't do his voice. But so this is Edward G. Robinson. By the way, according to the Black Dahlia book, which is interesting, right? He's in the circles of the Black Dahlia people too. So he was hanging out with George Hodel, as we've discussed in the Exquisite Corpse book, which is the Black Dahlia Avenger, George Hodel being the father of Steve Hodel, and Steve Hodel says, I think it was my dad. This book obviously gets into that too, but discusses the circles that were running together, and the open face of the what do you call this page in a book? I forget what it's called. There's a name for this page when you first open it. Anyway, it lists everybody and their connections with Man Ray and with George Hodel and Elizabeth Short, who is the Black Dahlia killer, and John Huston, the director. And where is Edward G. Robinson's on it? Here he is. So you'll notice here at the bottom, see if I can show you this. So here, Edward G. Robinson, actor patrons, together with Vincent Price, Paulette Goddard, Fanny Bryce. Edward G. Robinson is friends with John Huston and Man Ray. See the line connecting to Man Ray? I can barely see that. What do you think?
Also, Barrymore.
What about him?
The granddad Barrymore was in a satanic clique.
Oh, that's right. According to your book, yeah.
The Church of Satan.
This is Drew Barrymore's grandfather, right?
Says the famous deathbed sketch of John Barrymore was drawn by John Decker on a piece of brown wrapping paper. Decker and Barrymore were part of a cabal of Hollywood writers, actors, and bon vivants, which included W.C. Fields, Ben Hecht, and Gene Fowler, who wrote odes in homage to satanic forces and took on the names of various devils.
Do you want to show the picture on that over there?
Oh.
If you want.
Like that?
Yeah. And that's a drawing?
This here is the drawing of John Barrymore, and here's Anton LaVey sitting next to it. And then on...
Oh, go ahead.
That's okay. I was just going to show you the other page about his androids.
Oh, that's the pre-Android characters that LaVey came up with?
Yeah.
Well, he would play with these mannequins, right?
He had a whole, he called it a den of iniquity in his basement, set up like a bar with mannequins that he would interact with. And he thought that Disney was really good for beginning with experimenting with the animatronics, right? He was grateful to Walt Disney for introducing the synthetic to children.
The animatronics of Disney is a preparation for the coming aeon of the SEX bot.
Yep.
So we'll play a little bit of this Edward G. Robinson clip here from Seawolf, because he's an archetype of the... What we would call this? Just
anti-hero?
He's not an anti-hero because he's a villain, but he is not a sociopath or a psychopath. He's not chaotic evil. He's just sort of a classic villain, wouldn't you say? I mean, what is the reason that he says he's a villain?
Satanic attitudes, and like you said, Dante, and that also came up in that.
Oh, that's right, because he's reading Milton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That came up in that one last night. What did we watch last night? The one about the sister, seventh victim.
They mentioned Milton?
No, Dante. The restaurant that she rented the thing. We'll get there.
Okay, so the ship. If you don't know the story here, I'll just summarize it. It's worth watching. It's a really engaging and exciting 40s movie. But they end up on a ship. This guy stows away. He's a crook on the run from the cops. Another woman stows away on this ship, who's also on the run on the lam. And they find out that basically everybody on this crew is a gaggle of crooks and criminals that he's recruited, and he keeps them trapped there.
Yeah.
So basically,
he's ruling in hell.
Yeah, the ship is a symbol of hell. It's right. So imagine, the church is the ship, the ark, the icon you've all seen. I'm sure the Orthodox icon of the church as the ship with Christ steering the ship. This is the anti-version of that. You know what I'm talking about, right? We have the big icon, right?
Yeah.
Do y'all know the icon I'm talking about? The icon of the church as the ship. That's perfect for this movie because this is the opposite of that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
This one. So you guys can see that, right? Yeah. So this is literally the inverse of that. And what I didn't expect was that he has a library on his ship, and all he does is really study all of the great characters of literature and scripture and everything who are the villains to figure out how to rule. So he's over there reading Dante's Inferno to figure out how to be like Satan. He's reading Milton to figure out how to be like Satan. That's where he gives the quote, better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven. And so the whole allegory, it's a great allegory on many levels for being imprisoned in the kingdom of the world, being subject to the devil. You might even read it as a Gnostic thing, and he's the demiurge. He's the, socialist revolutionaries version of the biblical God, the way that the Gnostics view the Old Testament God the Father. You could see him in a lot of these ways, because Jack London, turns out, had a flip from being a radical individualist, a rugged Americanist individualist, to completely flipping and becoming this radical Marxist socialist. And I don't exactly know what the trigger for that was. I read a little bit of his biography, but it's odd, because I don't know if he wrote this when he was still like an Americanist individualist, but when he wrote this, you get the impression that the protagonist and his girlfriend, so that basically the guy who's the crook on the run hooks up with the girl who's on the run from her women's penitentiary, and they have a intimate love together. That is the thing that saves them. So love, right, and being willing to sacrifice it all is ultimately how they're the only two that get away. Everybody else ends up dead, and Edward G. Robinson is the type of evil that is happy to bring down everybody else with him. So all he wants to do, even if he's not going to win in the end, like, he wants to take everybody with him.
One thing I notice about this character is that he fails to take accountability for anything, which is kind of a satanic attitude.
Yes, his psychology is fascinating. That's a great point. Go ahead.
Well, nothing is ever his fault. That's a very narcissistic attitude. And also the whole sympathy for the devil, which Anton LaVey said, the poor me, everyone just dumps on me, so I must be evil. Self-fulfilling type of person.
Yeah, this comes up towards the end when there is a dialogue between one of the characters who's the writer, right? I think the writer, he's not a crook, but he's, obviously represents the Jack London character. There's an author who ends up on the crew, an unfortunate member of this crew, and he decides he's going to write the story. So because of the narcissism of the captain, he's always asking, the author, well, how are you going to write me? How are you going to portray me? And he's always saying, well, I'll portray you, the way I actually see you, the way you really are. And he's always trying to convince the author, remember, that he's like, well, but you don't really know my story, because, it was always me against the world, and I was always screwed over. And like you're saying, it's not my fault. Everything made me this way.
That's just how the world is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then at the end, you missed this part at the end. I think you dozed off, but they had the part where they had an exchange where he's like, no, actually, I'm going to write you as a really weak, fragile person. And that's what causes his narcissistic ego to crack, because he knows that this guy's going to write a book about him and make fun of him.
Oh.
And this causes him to crack at the end. And then he just sort of like goes down with the ship, just sort of staring off into, the distance, which is ironic because the author gets shot. Mm-hmm. So he's not really sure. He doesn't know, because he's blind. He has these periodic blindnesses that he goes through when he gets these migraines, right? So he doesn't see that the random gunshots actually did hit the author that's on board, but he doesn't really know that, so he's afraid that the book's going to be written about him as this fragile character who, when reality spills in to the narcissist, it causes them to snap and they lose it and they go off into other dimensions in their head, right? Or they do something crazy like, mass violence events, you know what I mean? What were you going to say?
He did have a chance to redeem himself, which he totally messed up when the doctor came out of his drunkenness and was like a respectable character again, and he could have given him the, respect in front of the crew that he deserved, but he made a fool of him instead and caused him to kill himself. You remember that? So there was a definite turn that he took for the dark side in this movie, where he had just done a good deed. He could have continued with that.
Right.
But he went back to his old ways.
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels too to things like novels that, like I said, that I just happened to be covering, like Confidence Man, right? Everybody knows Melville and Moby Dick, but and there's I think people have made parallels to, Ahab and that having Gnostic themes in Melville's novel too. Maybe, I don't know if that's the case. I'm not sure. But in Confidence Man, it's the same thing where the things that are happening on the ship are kind of an allegory for life, for civilization, for the kingdom of Satan. The ship is called the Ghost, right? I mean, it's telling you that it's a bunch of dead guys, and from the beginning that they're doomed. In fact, we're told that the captain's brother has been hunting him across the sea for years, and when he finds him, he's going to sink his ship. So that's coming, right?
Yeah.
And eventually it does happen. His brother, who's the righteous brother, sinks the evil brother, sort of a Cain and Abel thing. But the question is, then, who's going to go down with the ship? Who's going to get away? And it ends up being only the couple that find love, right? So that's the Jack London interjecting, classic literature stuff to make it a good story. But yeah, it was really a good character study in basically fundamental pure satanic evil, right? Not chaotic evil, because there's a method to the system of Edward G. Robinson's character. But we're going to look at some archetypes of evil that are not ultimately that methodical, but just sort of chaotic. And I remember too that we were thinking about archetypes of evil in literature, and I covered the chapter in 1984 that I think is one of the I think he's the wickedest villain of all the villains, and that's O'Brien. So if you didn't watch my video on that, go check that out. But also, whether it's O'Brien or whether it's Mustafa Mond, I mean, these are villains that are methodical, and they're definitely psychopathic. They're not sociopathic, and I think probably Edward G. Robinson's character is psychopathic because he's able to get along and run the business of the ship. But sociopaths, they're more like the brute criminals who can't control themselves, right? They're not rational. They're not Patrick Bateman, right? They're like, I was giving the analogy to, Tony Soprano is a psychopath. Paulie Walnuts is a sociopath. Go ahead.
You want to start with White Heat?
Yes. So let's get to our next villain, who is chaotic evil. This is where it gets different, right?
Yeah.
We get a different, and this is wild because there's not really chaotic evil, and except for maybe some of those older German expressionist films. Maybe some of the villains in that, which we'll talk about in just a second. But
James Cagney.
Yep, we've never covered a James Cagney film, so
I think it's
neat to finally do it.
Character could be an archetype of the Joker.
Yes, you had a great insight on that. I think you're spot on.
Just evil for evil's sake. So what it is he's the boss of a robbing, what do you call them? A bandit group?
A small-time gang of bandits.
Yes,
yeah.
A gang. And
we're going to have to give you a thesaurus.
I know. They start off robbing this train, and you see right off the bat that these are like psychos or whatever, because they don't have to cause as much chaos. They already were going to get the money, and they shot the guy after they had already got the money. Then one of the guys gets scalded, and they leave him to die.
It'd be all right. Let's just go on, right? So no concern at all, right?
No.
Like for human life.
No.
Which is the true Freudian stuff, because of the relationship that he has to his mom in this movie.
Yeah.
And in the 1940s and 50s, they loved Freudian stuff. And you can even see that, the Joker, I mean, he definitely influences Jack Nicholson's Joker. Any of the, Heath Ledger, where the Joker's burning money for the sake of burning money. I mean, you couldn't have that without James Cagney and White Heat.
I think he did such a good job, too, because you were scared of what he might do, because
he's chaotic.
Yeah.
Like, there's no rhyme or reason to it.
Yeah.
He'll do crazy stuff out of nowhere, right? Like, one of the best parts is when they've kidnapped a guy and they've got him in the trunk, and the guy's like, I can't breathe, and he walks over and is like, oh, you can't breathe, huh? And he shoots a bunch of holes in the trunk. He kills the guy. He's like, can you breathe now?
Yeah. Is a liar, a thief, a murderer. His wife and his number 2 were cheating together. This movie had some crazy technology, the way that they triangulated his position, and car phones. In 1949, the police had like car phones. What do you think that could have been, like a walkie-talkie system or something?
Well, they even talk about triangulation. So there is a weird element to where this movie interjects the attempts of the police to have technology to track and surveil criminals on the lam, right? It makes me think of like the Boston BOMBING, like how they shut down the whole city because of those guys, and oh, this is great, we got him, right? But it was like total violation of the ideas of American rule by law. But the auspices were the terrorist are on the loose, and you get the same idea in this movie that, oh, well, you see, the serial killer is on the loose, so everybody has to be under house arrest. Everybody has to be subject to the police surveilling and basically, coming in anybody's house that they want.
That's what happened to him.
Yeah, well, that will set the stage for all future serial killer movies. That and the Cabinet of Caligari set the stage for the methodology of the police in what's called the police procedural in movies and literature. And it also sets the stage for how every true crime / serial killer movie will be done. But now you're going through the things really quick. Like you went to the tech, which it is presaging a lot of surveillance in terms of local police technology and all that, which is really odd. Never seen that in any movie anywhere near this time frame of 1949. But it's a very important part in the film. Oddly enough, it plays. They keep referencing it, right? The cops keep having they keep showing these giant gadgets that they've got, right? And they've all got car phones, which I assume, like Jamie said, is walkie-talkies to the other cop cars. But we're watching this and we're like, what? They got car phones in 1949. They're over there like, see, go, you're right behind him. Hurry up.
They had a twirly thing on the car, like a satellite, not a satellite, but
it was some kind of a little radio receiver on the cop car, which was wild. But anyway, back to the mom thing, because you jumped from that mom thing. The Freudian elements here are interesting because it's like a INCEST, what'd you call it? Emotional INCEST, which is a psychology idea of an improper relationship between a parent and a child, or perhaps other siblings as well. But in this case, it's kind of like Norman Bates, that what has caused James Cagney to be who he is that he's had this ridiculous mother figure, right? And so while it's true that she's the only person he can trust, she's also the cause and the enabler of his insanity.
Yeah.
Because she's raised him to be a criminal. She is basically the mastermind of the criminal gang, not him.
Oh, good
Because
point.
she's the one who's like, well, I know who you can trust.
Yeah.
Here's what you need to do. Get rid of him, right? Okay, Ma. Yeah, sure, Ma. Right?
Yeah.
He's basically whatever Ma says, right? Yeah, okay, Ma. Right? And even when he dies, everybody knows, like, even if you've never seen this movie, everybody knows, top of the world, Ma. Right?
Yeah.
That's his line when he blows up the chemical factory. But this is Freudian stuff, too, because, as we said, in the 1940s, like, Freudian stuff in film was just everywhere. Like, it was 1930s and 40s. They loved it. Spellbound, Hitchcock Spellbound. I mean, it's everywhere. But there's also Jungian psychoanalysis stuff as well in a lot of these films.
Well, at one point in the movie, a policeman has to go undercover in jail and become friends with him to get some information from him, right?
Confidential informant, yeah.
And ended up being
it was a police
cop.
informant, right?
Yeah. So he's like, he liked him as a brother, and so basically every single person betrayed him from beginning to end.
Everyone betrayed me.
Yes.
Like Tommy Wiseau says.
And this is what causes his psychological break in the very end, where he's like laughing at his demise instead of, he's cracking up at the...
Yeah, so Edward G. Robinson goes down with the ship, and he just sort of has a psychotic break, and he just sort of stares off into the distance because he knows that the legend that he wanted to cultivate for himself as this great revolutionary, satanic rebel, like Satan in Milton's Paradise Lost, he's going to be made fun of, and so he just has a psychotic break, and he's just sort of like a zombie, right? He's catatonic, but James Cagney is total chaotic evil Joker level, where it's like the crazier and the worse it gets for him, the more he's enjoying it. And so it's like he wants to go out in a blaze of glory, right?
Yeah.
So the white heat is like, it just gets hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter, and he throws more on the fire. Like, the crazier it gets, you think at the end when he's at the chemical factory, like, there is no hope. He's got to give up. I mean, there's no way for him to get away from the cops that have completely surrounded this giant, bizarro chemical factory. And instead of giving up when he's got snipers pointed at him, he literally just shoots the giant Epcot-sized chemical balls that he's standing on, and the whole place goes up.
Balls of chemicals everywhere.
Hence, white heat.
Yeah.
And his last line was, "Top of the world, Ma!"
Yeah.
So even to his last breath, right, it was all about the relationship to his weird psycho mom, as we'll see is very similar to Norman Bates. But there's a point, too, that's interesting in the film where he seems to kind of have a psychotic break as well. And it's when they tell him his mom's dead, and he flips out in the prison. And he does this, like, wild, he goes nuts on the cafeteria table. And he's just flopping around and acting crazy. And then a couple scenes later, he's standing out in the woods, and he's talking to his mom in his head. Right? So he it's kind of foreshadows, even maybe in cinema, what happens with Norman Bates. Do you remember that part?
Yeah.
And doesn't somebody walk up to him, and they're like, "Who are you talking to?" And he's ordeals that's really elaborate, heists, and they're busts. I mean, they're super elaborate, but he's really crafty. So he's a Joker archetype, but he's the cunning, chaotic Joker. He's not the fool, right?
He's the mastermind.
He's a fool in the sense that he's willing to go down with the ship, but he's not a fool in the sense of being a clown. I mean, he's always laughing and smiling, though. I think when you see villains constantly chuckling, and they have that smirk, that grin,
Yeah.
and that happy face when they're doing crazy stuff. So if you've never seen White Heat, it's a must see. What do we got next?
Sunset Boulevard.
What's the maybe we should do one of these ones that are not. We did what's that one? Let's do this one because it wasn't that good.
Okay.
In my view, I didn't really care for this. I thought it was going to be more occult / cult stuff going on, and there wasn't much to it.
Seventh Victim.
Yeah.
1943.
And why did Mr. Anton think
He
this
said,
was something important?
This is an example of the way that Satanists actually behave.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
So this was a truer portrayal of what covens are up to and how they do business and take care of things.
Yes, that's right. I forgot that. She's got her turf bangs.
Yeah.
So there's they recruiting turf bangs into their witch covens.
She looks like Christina Ricci right there.
Yeah, she does. Exactly. And the weird part of this movie is that they made this character who's recruited and mind controlled in this cult. She seems to have been chosen by the coven because she wants to die. Now, she's not actually suicidal, but she has
ideation.
Weird fixation on, thinking about doing it.
Yeah.
And her sister's like, well, is she suicidal? Because she goes missing. And they're like, no, she's not. In fact, she bought the noose because she just wanted to remind herself of death. And it's like,
yeah.
But she's also sort of under mind control by this coven.
Right. So this one starts out at a religious girls' school, and her sister Mary is informed that her sister has been missing. The dark-haired girl is missing.
Yeah.
Named Jacqueline. So Mary has to go looking for Jacqueline, and this is how this movie unfolds. She finds out Jacqueline rented a room, and all it had was a noose and a chair. And that's what I was talking about a couple minutes ago. The room that she rented was above a restaurant called Dante's.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, exactly. Yes, you have the Dante Inferno reference there, right? And these are all in film and literature, right? She's proto-goth for sure. You're gonna constantly have Milton and Dante referenced.
Yeah.
I mean, endlessly. And Shakespeare.
So the Sister Mary goes to the Missing Persons Bureau, and it's super busy. So there's something they're saying right there, like this is kind of a thing that happens.
Yeah, this cult is getting rid of victims, and you think it's not what you think. You think it's going to be this, mind-controlled satanic coven existing in a estate somewhere, but it's actually a bunch of people that gather in a condo in a city, and it's a bunch of prominent people in the city. But isn't it like 13 people? 12 or it's
something like that. Yeah.
It's like an actual coven.
Yeah.
And they're recruiting people, bringing them in, and finding people who want to go along with their cult ideology, even to the point of wanting to die.
So I thought this was interesting. The whole thing centers around this cosmetics company.
Yes, the cult runs a cosmetics company and has trapezoids as their symbol, which
or parallelograms, rather.
Is now I'm all effed up.
A trapezoid is a triangle with the top cut off, and a parallelogram I think is like a rectangle that has.
The reason I'm saying that is because I think LaVey says that trapezoids are satanic because they're incomplete, right?
Yeah.
They represent the unfinished ashlar and the incomplete. The great work is incomplete.
Yeah.
And it also supposedly attracts the demonic and whatever because it's not right. It's like off.
He calls it a frustrum.
Yeah. So that's what was in the movie.
Yeah. And that's what he talks about.
Yeah. So they use, but it's two different symbols. One of them is a triangle and one of them is a parallelogram, right? Yeah.
So there's a mysterious psychiatrist claims to be taking care of her. Come to find out, one of the coven people took the cosmetic company from her, and they were using their satanic logo as the logo of the cosmetics.
So wait, it wasn't the cosmetics wasn't connected to the cult.
It was after. Well, she owned the cosmetics company, and she got wrapped up in this cult. Jacqueline.
Okay.
The dark-haired girl.
Right.
Her and this other lady, and this several people from the cosmetics company were in the cult, and Jacqueline starts going crazy.
All of the 40s ladies look like the same lady. I mean, this is the only one that you can distinguish because she's got her turf bangs. Like everybody else is just a 40s lady, and they're all the same, right? They all look the same.
So the cult is taking over the cosmetics company.
Yes.
And Jacqueline's going crazy.
Yes.
And it just gets worse from there.
Okay.
It has a very bad ending. But the cult is trying to get Jacqueline to kill herself.
Right.
Because they voted on non-violence this time.
It's a non-violent satanic cult. Okay.
So they're get her in the room and berating her for all day and night, trying to get her to drink her own poison.
That's right. Yeah. But I mean, if you're trying to get a person to do something suicide, unaliving themselves, I mean, you're still involved in murder.
Yeah.
It's just silly, right?
Yeah. So I guess they had done this to 6 other people in the cult.
Right.
And she's the 7th, and so she already wanted this, and she ended up using the room with the noose in it at the end.
Gotcha. So let's move on now to it had some interesting elements, but I did not think it was that good of a film. It's a stupid ending, and let's do Fritz Lang next.
Okay.
What were you gonna say? By the way, guys, if you want to, if you would support the show through the super chats, everybody is stingy today. We're not getting. I'm gonna have to start doing some Marjo preaching over here. Uh-huh. And if I preach like Marjo, would I get giant piggy stacks of cash like Marjo bucks. So the plot does sound great, but the problem is that the ending of the film, the way it's executed, it's silly. You'll see if you watch Seventh Victim. It's just not that good of a movie. And
it's very glorifying of death. So all throughout the movie, that one of the neighbors was a dying woman. the lady who lived next to the noose was dying, and at the very end she goes out on the town for one last like hurrah before her death, and the healthy lady just killed herself. Remember that?
No, I mean, this movie didn't keep my
like
attention.
it.
I didn't think it was any good, but I did enjoy M. Now, if you've not seen Fritz Lang's M, it's one of the most important films. Most lists will list it as, top 100. And it has Peter Lorre as the serial killer in 1931. And this movie influences from henceforth all serial killer, all true crime, all police procedurals in movie and lit. So it's based on an actual series of serial killers, according to Lang in various interviews. The most relevant is the character named, I looked all this up.
Vampire of Dusseldorf?
The Vampire of Dusseldorf. Peter Kürten. Peter Kürten is the Vampire of Dusseldorf. And he also has the hallowed title of, quote, King of SEX Perverts. He's a pervert, as Theo Von would say, yeah. Guilty of 9 counts of bad things. So you can look up Peter Kürten, the Vampire of Dusseldorf. Anyway, so he goes into this, but according to Fritz Lang, there was also 3 other serial killers in Germany that influenced this figure. But what I really liked about this movie, if you haven't seen it, we'll look at a little bit of the trailer here. I think this is out of copyright, so it should be okay. It's that old, I think.
This one was genuinely creepy and done very well.
Yeah, it's a classic.
Janus Films and Nero Films working with Fritz Lang on this.
Well, it was produced by Nero, but Janus is a later, I think, British company that owns it. But what is weird that Jamie noticed, first of all, is that this movie doesn't really have a protagonist, right? This movie has basically Peter Lorre as the protagonist, but there's no other characters. He is the character.
You follow throughout the whole thing, that you sympathize with.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, there's no characters.
Yeah.
I'm saying there's no major lead characters.
Yeah, he's the only constant.
There's only one. You see the police chief every now and then, but he's not a character. Like, we're not involved in any other character other than the serial killer, and everyone, getting whipped up into a tizzy, right? Just like with James Cagney, the whole city's got to be basically shut down over this guy because we can't find him, and what's going on. And so after several children end up missing and gone unalived, the police are in a tizzy, and they decide that they're going to have to resort to any and every means, and this means going after all of the underground crime syndicates. And going after all the underground crime syndicates makes the gangsters mad. Now the gangsters are mad at M, and they want to find him because there's too much heat on the gangsters. They can't run their rackets when the police are constantly on the lookout for anything and everything.
So this movie influenced Babylon Berlin.
Totally.
Right?
I think so, yeah.
And it's like 1930s Berlin looks so cold and shabby. It does not look like a very prosperous place.
Well, they got hobos and balloons, though. Look at those happy balloons that will instill nightmare fuel forever.
Well, this is
when
the original.
when the hobo gives you his balloon.
Don't take candy from strangers. He's literally luring kids into his trap by buying them balloons and candy.
Yes, classic creeper move, right? And also, what we've not seen with the villains that we've looked at with Cagney and Robinson, now we're getting into a different type of weirdo creep villain, which is the collector, right? So a branch of the serial killers, they're collectors. This actually gets novelized by John Fowles in his novel The Collector. And if you don't know, we've covered John Fowles' The Magus tons of times. I'm kind of tired of covering it. Jamie and I even did the Michael Caine Magus movie. The Magus. That's magic. Bloody magic, fool.
The Magus.
Bloody fool magic. The Magus with Michael Caine, the movie, is okay. It's not as good as the book. The book's really good. and you have this Illuminati figure. Literally, the novel mentions the Illuminati. You have this Greek zillionaire who's basically just messing with people for fun, right? Staging things, etc., etc. But John Fowles is famous also for writing this novel called The Collector, which became a movie in 1965, which is about the creeper who has to not just collect women, but even when the women pass away, he collects whatever he can. He might do what Norman Bates does and taxiderm them.
Well, that
to collect his. Yeah, I got a bunch of girlfriends. They over there with my taxidermy right there.
That also comes up in The Black Cat.
I was gonna say, yeah, Boris Karloff in The Black Cat is a collector.
Yeah.
And so it would seem that M has an element of this too, and we'll notice that I think he's possessed, and that's interesting because Fritz Lang, I don't think had any religious views unless he was some kind of an occultist. I think he was a socialist, and he supposedly wasn't happy about the socialism of Tiny Mustache Man, but he was a socialist still. I don't think he was a Bolshevik, but maybe some other kind of just normie socialist. And you see the socialism obviously in the Metropolis, which we've talked about. I have a chapter on Metropolis in my book. That's very Platonic, with the elites being the brain of the city and the workers being the body and the heart of the city. So there's some interesting socialism in that. But of course, Metropolis also has the occult satanic elements with the bringing to life of the girl, right? Mm-hmm. Of the AI. So there's a lot of esoteric prophetic stuff in Fritz Lang for sure. And I just don't know if he was into anything occultic. I haven't read biographies on him, but if you guys don't know, everybody for sure has seen, right?
That's probably the most classic expressionist occult film.
Yeah, and it predicts, right?
Metropolis, yeah.
It predicts the AI and the SEX bot, right? Yeah. As the result of satanic science, basically.
Yeah, and sci-fi too. It's expressionist, noir, sci-fi.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the predictive elements. It predicts the rise of Satanism. It predicts AI, transhumanism, tech, right? Mm-hmm. Because doesn't he have a mechanical hand?
Yeah.
Yeah. Rotwang, what's his name?
Rotwang.
Yeah. So the point is that obviously Fritz Lang matters in film because when he does M, what year was Metropolis? 1927. Yeah, so just a few years later he does M, and M is, again, serial killers before serial killers. I mean, Black Cat is what year? Because that's a serial killer.
34.
Okay, so this is prior to Black Cat. And what year is Caligari? That's the only one that's prior to this. Right? Mm-hmm. The only serial killer film
is that what's in his cabinet?
What?
His victims' collectibles?
I think so.
Oh.
Yeah, he's a collector.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's a collector.
Uh-huh.
And then he's a serial killer who collects. Exactly.
And these angles, I'm sure they would have something to say about those surrealist angles and those expressionists.
Yes, it's surrealism, expressionism together. That's where you see Man Ray and Salvador Dali continue a lot of this stuff in their artworks. But even in Man Ray, right, you get this idea of being a quote collection, like, because he's collecting women's parts, and women are in parts in Man Ray's art. It's super satanic, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. And part of the notion of surrealism too, which I've talked about. I couldn't find. I have a book on surrealism and film, and I couldn't find it, but it's really good because it talks about the notion of the surrealist philosophy being that there's no dividing between the waking state and the dream state, and if you come to that realization as a surrealist, artist or filmmaker, then you're going to realize that you're not guilty for any of your actions. And this plays into the Black Dahlia story, because the idea is that George Hodel and the peoples in his circles were into this kind of ritual crime because they justified it by their belief that, well, I'm not guilty because there's no difference between the waking state and the dream state. So if I'm not guilty of doing nasty things in my dreams, then how can I be guilty in this life? Because this life's a dream state. Mm-hmm. That's the reasoning. But all of this time period is secretly, you could say, influenced by a lot of the satanic and occult stuff and in the kind of underground way, because this is prior to the Hays Code. Once the Hays Code comes in, I think in the late 30s, and it goes all the way until sometime in the 60s, you can't show, right, husband and wife in the same bed, this kind of stuff. Because in Black Cat, like, the honeymooners have the same bed, because this is prior to the Hays Code.
Oh, okay. So in M, in Berlin in 1931, this whole crime spree is making it so that nobody can trust each other, because it could be anyone. And the kids can't trust the adults don't trust each other, and the killer is writing into the police and the press. So a lot of movies draw from this.
Well, not just that, like, so actual serial killers. I mean, like,
yeah, like Zodiac.
The Zodiac killer writes into the news, aha, you can't catch me. Here's my code of, Zodiac symbols. Decode it, right?
Yeah.
And he's using, like, military code and ciphers, which is partly why people thought, oh, this is somebody, involved in the military, right? Have you heard when the Zodiac guy supposedly calls in the radio show? Mm-mm. In real life?
No.
Yeah, this is a famous event where he calls into a radio show.
Oh, that was in the movie.
Yeah, but it's real.
Okay.
I mean, supposedly, right?
Yeah.
Jim Dunbar show.
Uh-huh.
So let's see. This is supposedly the Zodiac. This is not the movie. This is in real life, right? And I'm showing you this because Peter Lorre, as the murderer M, writes in his code letters to the police station.
Belli, accompanied by police and newsmen, waited 45 minutes today to keep a rendezvous with San Francisco's Zodiac killer of 5 persons. The man who made the appointment never showed up. The meeting was arranged this morning when a caller, identifying himself as Sam, reached Belli on a KGO-TV talk show.
And whether this is him or not, no, obviously nobody knows, but it's interesting that he's calling himself Sam, given the fact that Sam plays in the Berkowitz, right?
Son of Sam.
Son of Sam, but now suddenly Zodiac Killer is calling in as Sam, supposedly.
He said he was the Zodiac Killer and needed help. Here's how it looked and sounded.
Talk to us. Just tell us what's going on inside you right now, Sam, please.
I have headache.
Right. How long have you had those headaches, Sam? In a long time?
Since I killed a kid.
Well, was it before December that you had the headaches?
Yes.
Were you in service that you might have had an injury in service? Did you ever fall out of a tree or downstairs? Were you ever unconscious?
Did you ever have an injury in the service? Maybe you fell out of a tree.
Yeah. Did you fall on your head when you were a baby?
When the general told you to get up in that tree, son. You fell out of a tree in the service?
Oh, no.
You don't remember. Does aspirin do you any good?
No.
Doesn't do any good.
Sam? Does aspirin do you any good? I'm a serial killer. I'm calling in, by the way, and I have headaches. Have you tried aspirin?
Young stuff never did me any good either when I had headaches.
Sam, let me ask you a question. Did you attempt to call this program one other time when Mr. Belli was with us? And you
what?
Did you try to call us one other time about two or 3 weeks ago when Mel Belli was with us?
Yes.
And you
couldn't get through?
Couldn't get through? The phones were tied up? Was that it?
Yes.
Right. Sam, let me ask you this. There's some reason why you go to a particular doctor or a particular priest, and some reason why apparently you wanted to talk to me or Lee. Is it that you feel that we have compassion for people who get in trouble? Or is it you feel that we can do something for you? Or is it you feel that we have enough integrity that if we promise you something, that we're going to stick to it?
Well, let's find out why he wanted to talk to. Why did you want to talk to Mr. Belli, Sam?
I don't want to be hurt.
Ready to take your...
So there's that. I just thought it was interesting, this notion of, right, calling in to the cops and leaving the clues. We think of that as a, Hannibal Lecter or a modern, basically every serial killer movie. But it's Peter Lorre, right, sending in his letters. Did you notice what any of the letters said?
No.
Okay.
It's part of their narcissism.
Well, there's a different thing going on with Lorre, though, because I'm sure he is a kind of a narcissist, but he's possessed, to the extent that he's not in control of his faculties, right? So, like Edward G. Robinson and James Cagney, both of them have blinding migraine headaches. Remember? They both do.
Oh.
But they never dissociate. The closest thing that happens with Cagney is that he starts talking to his dead mom, but he doesn't really dissociate. But they both have blinding headache, and the blinding headaches are they're blinded.
Oh.
You see, they're blind.
He said the same thing, kind of.
Who?
In his pleading speech at the end.
Well, but what I'm saying is that when Peter Lorre gives his speech and says I can't help it, he's saying I'm possessed.
Mm-hmm.
The compulsion within me screams and it takes over.
Yeah, that's what Psycho said.
Who?
The Psycho at the end.
Oh, Norman Bates.
All of these had so many commonalities.
You thought his name was Psycho? Jamie just thinks that the name of every movie is the name of the character. His name is M. Well, he kind of is. He's murderer. Yeah. So.
Okay.
Who's your favorite actor? Star Wars.
Well, I call him...
Is that Luke or is that Chewbacca? Who's Star Wars? Han Solo is Star Wars.
We call Edward G. Robinson Keyes because I couldn't remember his real name, but I could remember his
that he was in
name.
Key Largo. That's right.
Yeah.
By the way, I put Key Largo in the movie and I forgot. We don't have notes on Key Largo, but I'll fix that. We'll flip out Key Largo with Fritz Lang's M because M is much more important film than Key Largo. But although Key Largo is pretty good.
So the crime bosses have to band together to catch him because the police are overwhelmed going house to house. They're making up domestic spying, see something, say something, neighborhood watch type stuff.
They set up neighborhood watches. Everybody's supposed to spy on their neighbors over this one killer, right? Yeah. Which when the serial killer phenomenon pops off in the 70s, this is Dave McGowan's critique of the serial killer phenomenon. Remember, Dave McGowan made the point that that was to get everybody in society atomized and no longer connected with other people, which seemed to have worked.
And then they have to recruit the beggars to be spies.
Yeah, well, this is an idea, interestingly, that the criminal underclass, the organized crime figures decide that they will have the network of beggars. That's actually not new, though. That was done by the British royals were doing that back in the day. So, like the Queen, like Elizabeth, right? She had a giant spy network. That wasn't just professional spies. Like she would hire street urchins to spy for her. And this is also, if you read Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who, by the way, it turns out was a Fabian socialist. Conan Doyle has, Sherlock Holmes has a network of hobos. So the hobo network is also an untapped spy network, but the criminals in M are aware of that. So they recruit the hobos.
Yeah.
And that's how M gets caught, is through the hobos. It's not the police. It's the criminal underground that ends up catching him.
Yeah. He compulsively whistles the same tune.
Yes, that was interesting because, yeah.
The 1812 overture, that do 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 do. Yeah.
Uh-oh. Watch out. I'm going to get triggered. I'm going to start. You're going to be singing Antoine Dodson songs here in a little bit. Hide your kids, hide your wife, because everybody out here, you don't have to come and confess.
You noticed that maybe Kill Bill, the whistles in
Of course it is, yeah.
Take that from it.
So this is why Tarantino has Daryl Hannah come in to kill Beatrix Kiddo, and she's whistling that yeah. So this is an homage to Peter Lorre as the killer, who is triggered by his whistling. So for whatever reason, whenever he's about to do it, he starts compulsively whistling that overture.
Well, there's some interesting imagery, like, okay, so he's walking through town and he's not thinking about killing, And then he sees in a window of a knife store the reflection of a little kid with the knives, and he gets a weird pleasure.
It triggers him, yeah.
And he has like a weird pleasure moment, and he gets triggered. And the next store that he walks by is a bookstore with a old-timey hypnotic trance spiraling, right? And a thing, there it is, right behind him. So it is definitely talking about like hypnotism, trance.
Well, he's in a trance state when he's triggered by the sight of youth.
Yeah.
Right. When he sees the youth out and he thinks of like knives and like this triggers him, and he starts to go into this dissociative state. So he really does dissociate. And he talks about it later on, and you see the spiral spinning behind him, just sort of symbolic of his trance state. And that's why he explains to the criminal court, because he actually gets kidnapped by the crime syndicate, and they hold an underground criminal mafia
Lynch
court.
mob.
It's a mafia court.
I know.
And they convict him, and they're like, "You're not going to get away with your insanity plea, right?"
Yes.
Because he knows that if he's tried in the normal courts, he'll plead insanity, and he might get off. And they're like, "The state will have to pay for you." And the mobsters are like, "You shouldn't be a ward of the state, being pampered up there in wherever prison." They mentioned one of those famous German prisons, but I forgot which one it was. I remember studying that in German class, but they're like, "No, we'll give you mafia justice."
He has a monologue about how he operates, and he's begging for mercy. He's saying, "I have a cursed thing inside me." He's possessed. He's always running from himself. He doesn't remember the killing when he's done.
Yeah, so he dissociates and says, "I didn't realize." The paper says this is me doing this. And he's like, and I couldn't believe it when I read it in the paper. And then he said, "But if I tried to tell people that, there's somebody else doing it with inside of me or something like," he's like, "nobody will believe me."
Right. And Norman Bates says the same thing. He doesn't
at
remember.
The end?
Yeah.
Oh, did he say that at the end?
Yeah.
Interesting. So here he is at the mafia criminal court where the mobsters all decide he's guilty. And then the police bust in, and then they take him to the normal court. And we don't exactly know what the verdict is, but we think he probably is guilty. But yeah, this film basically sets the stage for every future serial killer movie. What did you think of him?
It was good and creepy.
There's some other really interesting Fritz Lang, Edward G. Robinson films that we're not going to cover tonight. There's the one about the paintings. Actually, there's two. I think Fritz Lang did the other one too. Where he's like the beta simp. Yeah. So in Scarlet Street, Edward G. Robinson plays the beta simp who is like totally duped by this chick that he trusts, a white knight. Remember that? But yeah, that is a Fritz Lang movie. Yeah.
That's mentioned on LeVay's list.
Yes, because he's
probably
he's
because
duped.
she's the con man.
Yeah, so there it is. She cons Edward G. Robinson right there, and it's a pretty good movie. But I actually thought the other one about the painting, the woman in the window, I actually thought this was a better film. So this is another Fritz Lang film and both of those though have a really important place for artwork icons and paintings. Like paintings play a key role in both of these films. Did you notice that? Because he's a painter and he thinks he's going to win over this hood chick, right? This ratchet hood chick, right? With his paintings. Not in this one, but in the other one. And in this one, he goes off into a dream state, and then the girl that's in the painting shows up and says, "Oh, come with me on this, adventure," and he gets all wrapped up in all this femme fatale stuff. But this is a surrealist film because he's lost in this dream state for most of this movie, following this, babe that wraps him up in this drama. You got to watch out for the bras with the gams, right?
Yep.
The broads with the gams will be your undoing if you're in a 1940s film. for sure.
Yes.
So, is that good? We got to do Sunset Boulevard, right? One of the most important films, also of all time, I think. Go ahead.
Gloria Swanson. She was an interesting character because she's kind of playing herself.
Yes, because she actually was
a fading star.
A
silent movie.
She was a silent movie star, yeah. And it also this is a meta film because it also includes Cecil B. DeMille, right, as himself, Norma Desmond. Gloria Swanson is playing a silent film era star, which she was, and I didn't even realize until this time watching it that she also has a psychotic break and dissociates to an alter where she's a younger version of her in one of her early films. Remember at the end?
Yeah.
So, by the way, if you haven't seen Sunset Boulevard, you must see this. It is one of the most important, I think.
I don't know. Like, one of the cool things about these shows is that we don't know when we pick them. Like, they're in the same genre, yes, but there's so many common themes in them that you wouldn't recognize unless you watched them all in a clump like we do.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, unless you're doing a study of film noir, you won't notice these things in particular. I think people that study film know these things because you'll take a class on film noir and you'll watch a bunch of these. But we watched a few of these in some of my film classes at my university, and that kind of introduced me to this stuff. But I'm by no means any kind of expert in this. But I mean, Sunset Boulevard is famous not just for being really weird and ahead of its time in terms of the dark kind of film that it is, but it's also a very famous screenplay. It's a hallowed, respected dialogue and all that. So, at this time, you have to have the snappy dialogue, right? That's a huge part of the film. It's not really, I mean, I think, who is it, William Holden? Yeah, I mean, he was a big draw, but the main draw at this time, right, is stars and dialogue, and then everything else is kind of after that. Like, people didn't really care so much about the plot. I mean, the plot mattered, but I'm saying that for the Hollywood studio system, they're concerned with the star and the money, right? The story and the art and all that's down the road. They're not so that's not what drives a lot of these, and that's different from the 1930s with the silent films, because before the Hays Code and all that, they were very experimental. They were interested in doing film for art purposes. But by the time of the studio system, now it's star driven, it's money driven, and you have the Hays Code and all that. So you can't show a lot of things and do a lot of things that you could in the silent era.
So this is 1950. So a little bit later, but still has the same feel of the other guys. And there's a murder in Hollywood, and the main character is a penniless writer for Paramount. And
he's the one murdered, and he's telling you the story of his murder.
Right. And he can't get a break. The repo man's after him. He ends up at Gloria Swanson's house by accident.
By accident, right? He's trying to get away from the repo men who are going to take his car away. And he's actually a good writer, right? Like, he did a couple screenplays that got him famous, but he's got writer's block, and he can't figure out anything good, and so he's out of work. So now he's on the lam from the repo men, and he ends up parking in her garage at just some giant old Hollywood estate, right, in the hills. And he ends up wrapped up in this just insane nonsense from this point on.
World, which she has built around her and her butler, who is Erich von Stroheim, who LaVey was a fan of his movies too. So that he's an old famous director, playing a butler who was an old director.
Yeah, playing himself. So again, a bunch of meta, elements to this movie. Yeah. With Cecil B. DeMille again playing himself.
The one of the weirdest things about this movie was the scene with the dead monkey. So this is what the writer comes upon when he knocks on her door one night, just wanting to use the phone or whatever, and they're about to have a funeral for a monkey. Remember that?
Yeah, because she's basically like Jacko. Remember Jacko with bubbles,
Totally,
right?
yeah.
I mean, just totally insane, but was such a big star at one point that they just went nuts, right? I mean, we all know this, right? The big A-listers that they just go crazy.
Like icons in monkeys, like Elvis had a monkey, Jackson had a monkey.
I think that it's a thing that people would do back in the day to be quirky and weird, to say that they had it, and people would talk about it, right? So it's another thing to do to get people talking about you. So it's like viral marketing back in the day, right?
That makes sense.
But
because remember in that movie about the aliens, the subplot of that was a sitcom family got murdered by their pet monkey or something.
Nope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's something about that throws back to old Hollywood and their monkeys.
Well, it's like when Tony Montana like just buys a big ass lion.
Yeah.
And puts it out back, right?
Yeah.
You have my lion.
Or is it tiger?
I got a tiger. You have my tiger. Yeah, it's a tiger. Lions, tigers, bears. Who cares?
So she's crazy because she was displaced by the talkies.
Yeah. So, but the reason we chose this also is that she is a villain who is an archetype, prophetically speaking, of today's narcissistic social media person, especially the narcissistic female on social media. She's the perfect prophetic prediction of this.
Delusional.
And well, just the way that this woman, again, so she's a rare case in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, right? How many people in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s would be seen by millions of people?
Not very
Almost
many.
nobody,
Yeah.
right? So she represents the fragile psychosis of a narcissist produced by the Hollywood machine of that time.
Right.
But nobody could have imagined, what if everybody had this phony offer that they could be the star of their own story? They could be an A-lister. They can be everybody can be famous on the internet. And the offer there of endless, infinite pseudo attention online is what Norma Desmond represents, right?
Yeah.
Today's people on Instagram or whatever seeking internet fame are the embodiment of what she is, and she goes nuts and snaps. So she's another one of these characters that eventually dissociates and snaps, and it has to do with the way the narcissist constructs his delusion. And then there's a time when reality crashes in so hard that the delusion collapses and they have a breakdown. And this is actually what the psychiatrist says at the end of Psycho about Norman Bates. What I just said is exactly what he said about Norman Bates, but in this, it happens in the exact same way, where Norma Desmond flips out when her world crashes and she dissociates, and her being led off to go to jail is for her the next movie, because all the press is there for her, right? Even though she's just killed this guy.
Yeah. And so she thinks she can make a comeback, and she's using the writer to write her movie so that she can relive her glory days.
Her whole life is a movie.
Yes.
She is the director and the star of her own movie.
Yeah.
And everyone else is an actor in her personal play.
And her house is a shrine to herself and also her prison.
It's
right?
both. And William Holden, when he's there, describes it like it's a prison. And in fact, there's several scenes where when he's dressed up in a tuxedo like Rudolph Valentino, she starts dressing him, right? Because she wants him to play the part of when she used to date, the A-listers back in the 1920s, right? And so he's got this tuxedo on, and the people his age are all like, why are you dressing like this? Why are you acting like this? Riding around in like these giant
leopard skin
limousines. And he's like, look, I got to do what I got to do, right? And I think he thinks that he'll get her money, right? Because she has all this money. And she talks about she's always buying him stuff. She's like, I have all the money I want.
He's trying to write Salome.
For her. Her life story is this horrible story that she's written.
Yeah.
As Salome.
And so this reminds us of Oscar Wilde. And Salome is, of course, the person who had John the Baptist beheaded, right?
Yeah, it's funny because there's a bit of truth in her ridiculous story. Because her dance is not Salome's sexy dance. Her dance is all of the glitz and the glam that she's leading William Holden down this primrose path to his doom, right? And he's gonna be the John the Baptist that ends up dead.
And everybody in her orbit is part of her play, but they're also in her prison, like her butler / ex-husband.
She's cucked and imprisoned Eric von Stroheim, who is always over there.
Butler zoned him.
She put him in the butler zone.
What the heck?
like Khaleesi put what's his name in the Captain Friend zone,
yes.
right? she butler zoned him.
Can't think of anything worse than that.
Great. That was good. I mean, I'd rather be in the friend zone than the butler zone, right? Because you're basically a servant.
But he's serving her because he is part of what damaged her, because he said that he's the one that put her in the movies when she was 16.
Well, and you almost feel like he might be a handler at one point, because at the end scene, even though he's a cuckler, the cuckler, he's her butler. At the end, he has to get her to come downstairs when all the cops and the press show up.
Yep.
And he's like, "Trust me, I know how to do this. Let me handle it." And he's like, "Norma, are you ready for the scene? Action." Mm-hmm. And she's like, "Is it on? The camera's on, right?"
Yeah, you did that.
And so then she goes back into thinking that she's on the set of her 1918 film when she played Salome.
Yep.
Because I think she played some kind of elaborate. Remember, she's wearing. I showed you the pictures of her in her real. Remember?
Yeah.
She's wearing a peacock, right?
Yeah.
When she was a silent. This is a real film that she's in, right? With this giant peacock dress. So she might have actually played like a Salome figure, right? Mm-hmm. This is what I'm trying to find, right? Go ahead. I'm just making this point.
That was from a notable movie. That peacock headdress.
It's some old silent film, yeah. And it's people get stranded on a island, and there's like a primitive tribe there, and she's like the queen of the tribe or something.
That's right.
So anyway.
Okay. She's also has a unaliving ideation.
Yeah, she has tried 3 times to unalive. But we don't know if she really, because she's such a narcissist that we don't know that she's an actress. So is she acting? Right?
To manipulate.
She's manipulating everybody, right?
Because every time he wants to strike out on his own a little bit, she's like threatening to
I'll kill myself.
Yeah.
Right? She is. Do her eyes. You do it good. Yes, that's every scene. She's like Joan Crawford before Joan Crawford, basically.
Yeah.
Isn't she?
Yeah.
Because Joan Crawford always plays this crazy. So there's a short in the chord. So if you're wondering why it froze there, all these comments yesterday. I was like, I'm gonna have to buy a new microphone. I know that. So I'm sorry I don't have a new microphone between yesterday to today. So I know so we're doing a silent film. So there's no sound on purpose. Get it? It's a silent film. Get it?
Act with your eyes.
There's a short in the cord, so if you barely touch it, it goes out. And then everybody's like, no sound, no sound, no sound. I know. We're doing a silent movie. Okay, so what next? Where are we at? Are we done with Sunset Boulevard?
I like her extreme beauty treatments are amusing.
They're over the top.
And when she shot him in the back, he just keeps walking like he was that determined to leave her.
All the 1940s, well, this is 50, but gunshots...
They shoot from down by the hip.
It's very dramatic, and you keep walking, and like you get a herky-jerky motion going, and then you fall over. So
she's got that main character energy.
Well, she's a narcissistic, psychopath, delusional, slay queen who has a mental break and dissociates.
One thing that was interesting, I don't know if this is real or not, but there was a scene when all of the news cameras were going to her house after the guy was murdered, and it said Paramount News on it. So did the studios produce news also? I don't know. That would be interesting when it comes to FAKE news.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why it said Paramount News, but that is a good point. Maybe in the 1950s there was a Paramount News channel. I don't know. But do you know what I just realized too?
What?
The final scene of Sunset Boulevard is very similar to the final scene of To Die For. Do you remember when they catch Nicole Kidman as the killer? Mm-hmm. And it's all the press is there, and she acts just like Norma Desmond. She's like, this is my big moment. Yeah, here it is, right here. So the weather reporter who wants to be like the star, right? Yes. Nicole Kidman is literally playing another Norma Desmond figure, right? Exactly. A person who's willing to, do anything to be famous in media, including murder. Mm-hmm. And then when she gets caught, and she's just happy that all the cameras are there on her, right? So the police are there, and they're like, were you involved in all this? Oh, yeah, sure. By the way, I'm a star now. There's another, Nightcrawler with Jake Gyllenhaal. Same thing, right? Jake Gyllenhaal is a stringer. You see Nightcrawler? Mm-mm. No. So he's a stringer, and then he realizes he can start arranging the crime scenes to get a better reaction, and then he like climbs his way up, right, and steps on anybody in his way to be a media mogul. So multiple films again with this idea. Go ahead. What's next? Psycho. By the way, if you've not seen To Die For, it's a great movie making this point about media and now social media, right? Mm-hmm.
We were just talking about Sunset Boulevard and To Die For, and now we're going to talk about Psycho.
Mm-hmm. You got your Psycho notes?
Yep.
Now, I assume everybody's seen Psycho, so we're not going to rehearse all the plot again, but the most relevant will be Norman Gill Bates and his dissociation. Yeah. Can you not find it?
No, I found it.
Okay.
So this is the first neo-noir.
Right. So noir takes a break. I think, I forget the exact date, but late 50s, and then makes a comeback in 1960. Psycho's 1960, right? Mm-hmm. Is it?
Yeah.
And that comeback is neo-noir.
She starts off breaking all of the horror movie tropes that you can't break if you want to live, which is shacking up.
She started out, shacking it up with a boyfriend somewhere in a hotel.
Robbing her employer.
Then she realizes she can take. I forget how much money it is.
$40,000.
Yeah.
So her boyfriend can't support her, and they have a little discussion about how they can't have a normal life because he's just a dime store
a
clerk.
roustabout.
Yeah, he lives in the back of a dime store and he works there or something. And so she has an opportunity to steal $40,000 cash, and she takes it and flees out west.
And she's going to go to Vegas and make a new life for herself. And there's a great continual layers and levels of suspense, right? Because when she's on the run, right, she immediately starts getting followed and tracked by the police, and it's actually done really well. Where you're starting to root for her, right? You're like, oh, can't you do it? Can't you get away?
Well,
and then she goes and buys a new car.
Super suspicious.
And she's like, yeah, she is the what did I say? It's like it's a case study in how to be sus.
Yeah.
So if you're looking to be shady and sus, right? Like she's the worst version of it when she's on the run, and she ends up at Bates Motel.
Bates Motel Motel.
Yes, it is a Mulder motel. She's in there with I would argue he's kind of like the first incel. I mean, this is like straight up incel, and he doesn't act. Another thing we noticed too when you watch this film is that he doesn't act like even other actors in the 1960s acted.
He's a lot more natural.
Yeah, I mean, he comes off like a real
his
incel
performance
creeper.
Is like a modern actor.
Yeah,
and he does a very good sheepish, like nice guy.
Super nice dude. Yeah.
But he has a meal with her, and he you said this, evil recognizes evil, so he's got the evil touch, and he sees that in her, that
he realizes that she's on the run from something,
yeah.
and so he notices that she's done something, right?
Yeah.
Because he can see the same type of guilty conscience between the two of them.
Mm-hmm. And he's trapped there like one of his taxidermy animals.
Yeah, and he's obviously got a super creeper, fascination habit with, he's a collector. So we were talking about serial killers who are collectors, which is a real thing, right? And Norman is a collector because the taxidermy represents for him, right, a way to collect and control death, having power over life and death, right? And we know that he's killed his mom and her husband. Eventually we find that out, right? Mm-hmm. And so there is this weird, again, connection to the mom, much like James Cagney had, very Freudian, a lot of Freudian stuff in this. And Hitchcock, by the way, made movies for British Ministry of Information. So it's basically he was doing British intelligence work, right? So the taxidermy thing is interesting because it's really symbolic for not just his weird fascination, but other serial killers have a similar approach. So if you remember, Dahmer basically does the exact same thing, right? I mean, this is very much a Dahmer kind of thing, although I don't think Dahmer was like into cross-dressing or anything like that, but he's a lot of Dahmer in him with the collecting the dead carcasses.
Well, inspiration from this had to come from Ed Gein.
Yeah. Ed Gein was the guy who made like couches out of skin and bone.
And he would dig up bodies like Norman did.
Digged up his mom. He dig up his digging in the dirt to find the dead mamas that you hurt. Digging in the dirt.
Also, Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs.
Yes, there's very, very much Silence of the Lambs elements in this. And by the way, when are they going to ban this movie, right? Because Norman is he thinks he's a gal.
Yep.
Well,
he identifies.
What's wrong with that? Well, you cannot. If I want to identify as my mom, who are you to tell me I ain't my own mom?
Yeah.
Are you a bigot?
Also, Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
He's Ed Gein influenced.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember that. So, but you'll note the Freudian stuff is all through all these movies because it's always a question of how they relate to the father, right? The mother and the father. James Cagney, no father figure, and his mom is this controlling gangster psycho. Norman Bates, basically no father figure, but he's guilty of matricide, which produces this bizarre, what'd you call it? Emotional incest. Yeah, with his mom. And then he has a psychotic break, and basically the mom is his alter.
Well, listen to this about Ed Gein. You ready?
Yeah.
He would go to the graveyard in a dazed-like state and would sometimes come out of it in the middle of the act and go home empty-handed. Other times he dug up the graves of recently buried women who he thought resembled his mother.
Mm-hmm.
Soon after his mother's death, he began to create a woman's suit so that he could literally become his mother and crawl into her skin.
Nothing wrong with that. You can identify as your mom and wear a mom suit of actual mom
It's just
skin.
an Edgar suit. Remember in Men in Black, the aliens wore skin suit?
Yes. Who are you to judge this, by the way? Yeah. So yeah, I understand that the full split comes because he couldn't deal with the guilt.
Yeah.
And so the psychiatrist at the end explains that there was a splitness in his psyche, and doesn't Norman say that he doesn't know what he's doing, and
Mm-hmm.
that so there is a loss of time,
Mhm.
right, which happens with people with MPD-DID. So he's like Peter Lorre in that regard.
And he's also a voyeur with his peeping hole.
He has the peeping going on, which, by the way, that comes up in this. That's a big part of Wise Blood, because they engage in peeping there too.
Oh, you asked me something about the handwriting, and I forgot to say about the handwriting in M when he was writing into them. They were, what do you call that?
Handwriting analysis?
Analyzing it.
Mhm.
And they said it looks like a sex offender. So I don't know.
Just remember to wait.
I said about
Oh, they said that about Peter Lorre, you're saying?
Yeah.
They said his writing resembled
Yeah.
a pervert?
Yes.
Man, you got that dang pervert.
Perverted handwriting.
You got that handwriting of a dang pervert over there. So that means every doctor is a pervert, because a doctor can't write.
So if you'll notice, Norman Bates' house, not the motel, but the actual house, is your classic haunted house with the shape of the frustrum that Anton LaVey's
It
talking
does.
about.
It has the, yeah, exactly.
The trapezoid roof.
Right.
Which he, in his hypothesis and his studies and stuff of haunted houses and all those things, he had these theories that architecture could affect your psychosis.
Well, that comes up in Black Cat, actually.
Yeah.
Do you remember that even though this is kind of a primitive movie, Black Cat, they actually make a big deal about the bizarre Frank Lloyd Wright Bauhaus architecture of the facility that Boris Karloff inhabits.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild. Yeah, I think absolutely architecture. That's why that's the whole theology behind the structure of the church, right? The architecture of the church is going to affect your mindset.
So sound plus architecture could have a healing
or a damaging psychosis effect.
Let's see. The sister and the boyfriend go looking for the main girl who was unalive in the shower. You actually come to find out that he killed his mom and his mom's husband.
I just mentioned that.
Because of the emotional... You said that, right?
Yeah.
Oh, and the house is his psyche.
Yeah, there's he constantly refers to his mom living in the house, but then we find out later on that she's living in his head. And so when you rewatch the film, you'll notice a lot of the discussion about, oh, I could never leave this place because my mom can't leave.
Right.
She's in there forever. He's talking about in here, and that's a common symbol, right? Is the house is the psyche. The rooms in the head represent different compartments of the brain, alters. The basement is the subconscious. This is, again, pretty common in movies and lit. I didn't notice that until this time, watching it this time, by the way. I mean, that's the function of the house. But that wasn't evident to me until this time.
So this Ma is like the Ma in White Heat.
I just mentioned that, yeah.
And at the very end, the Ma personality is the one that takes over, and he becomes Ma and no longer Norman.
Yeah, Norman basically, quote, dies, right? And it's only Ma there. And then we have that weird monologue at the end of Ma talking in Norman's head as if she planned this all along. So I think maybe that we're supposed to think that in Norman's mind, oh, it wasn't me, it was Ma that did this the whole time, right? He's justifying this as she's really the one that did all this.
And it gets even weirder because it says if he felt attraction to another woman, the jealous mother had to kill the woman.
This reminds me of, if you've watched Millennium, which is a great show, right? Frank Black in season 1, he's always doing the same diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
Which we've talked about, right? The killer has a problem with his mother.
Yeah.
He sees himself as an avenging angel, taking it out upon all women.
Yeah. The killer always has this complex motive.
The killer's sexual frustration caused him to seek revenge upon his mother. Yeah. Right. Black Cat.
Yeah, so he's a bad boy. Black Cat's
But you'll notice that in a lot of the evil figures that we've studied tonight in our study of archetypal evil, the pattern we keep seeing is that they kind of have a break. Mm-hmm. Right?
Mm-hmm. Black Cat, this was one of my favorites of the bunch, I think, just for the classic horror.
I had not seen this.
Of it.
Yeah, believe it or not, I had not seen this. And one of the things that made me... Did I hit the stupid cord again? No. Made me want to see it was Nick Cage as Boris Karloff, Renfield, Dracula.
Oh, yeah. He did look like him. So this is a Carl Laemmle, Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff. You said it was an Edgar Allan Poe story. I didn't know that.
It says that at the beginning of the movie.
Oh, okay. So it's about some honeymooners on the Orient Express come across a Hungarian doctor, Bela Lugosi.
Dr. Weizagast or something like that.
Weirdergast,
yeah.
And there's an accident and they end up at the house of his old general who is...
a engineer, architect.
Right.
And also the head of a satanic cult. And this is a pre-Hays Code movie, so a lot of this stuff can be mentioned more openly, I guess you could say.
Right. So Boris Karloff's house is built on a giant graveyard from World War I, and part of his house is built on a fort, or like a...
It's an armament. Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's an occult power center because of it's the place where the most World War I soldiers died.
Yes.
So the Karloff figure who runs the satanic cult decided that would be a great place to build his giant estate.
Which is all ugly and like...
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's a giant Bauhaus Frank Lloyd Wright structure.
Yeah.
And
brutalist.
It's brutalist. It's let's see if there's a picture of it.
It's gross.
The what's it called? The mansion? I don't know what it looks like. A giant mental institute.
I noticed that both LaVey and Michael Aquino took some inspiration from the looks of these guys in this movie. With the Widow's Peak and...
Yeah, he actually looks like LaVey, and absolutely. But I can't... There's not... Here it is. You can barely see it, though. It's not a very good picture. But it's Bauhaus, like I said.
Yeah.
And again, I didn't expect that in this movie. This is not at all what I expected.
So...
Now, the Black Cat is the... What...
Cat is
he's
the
scared
eternal
of.
Life of the satanic coven. And you can try and kill it, but it will always come back.
Yeah, and that's what Bela Lugosi's afraid of, right? He can't just kill Karloff yet because he has to wait until the right time for some reason.
Yeah. So the honeymooners get in an accident. They end up at this creeper's house with the other doctor who has beef with him. And... they give her some drugs and she becomes kind of like a medium.
Well, Boris Karloff is basically drugging people and mind controlling them, right? And he's
collecting ladies.
He's collecting ladies. And this is really wild and edgy for... so again, the only reason you could have that in a movie is that it's before the Hays Code. Mm-hmm. And so he... we don't know exactly what... But he basically does... Norman Bates taxidermy on the ladies, and he's got a collection. And if you read analyses of this film, they'll say that this is actually hinting at like Necro stuff, and it doesn't say it, but it's like hinted at, right? And it freaks Bela Lugosi out when he sees his daughter,
his ex-wife, in
the lady collection.
Yeah.
And then his daughter is basically married to Boris Karloff now.
Yeah.
Who's part of the coven. So pretty wild stuff for 34. This is crazy.
So also he's an architect, so that's like Gnostic and Mason.
Well, he designed the facility.
Yeah.
The estate.
I like his bedtime stories. Remember, he was going to bed. He's just casually reading Rites of Lucifer before falling
the
asleep.
book is called Rites of Lucifer. It's like a giant prayer book that says Rites of it. Very simple, to the point. A lot of really wild architecture too in this. Like the scenes, the set are really. That's some of the best. The
angles are unnerving too.
Yeah, that's some of the best parts of this movie is the set design.
In the Satanic Church, they talk about like the angles as the angels, and weird angles can allow spirits to come through, and this is in Lovecraftian stuff, right? He also played the keyboards like LaVey.
There's his lady collection.
Yeah.
So he's a collector like the rest of the serial killer collectors.
He plays that da-na-na, da-na-na-na-na. Remember?
Will you be cool with me cryogenically putting you in a giant glass case if you pass away?
Only if I
Do you want your hair? Do you want your hair up or you want it down?
If I look like a wrinkled granny, I don't want to be preserved.
Well, he preserved him young.
Okay.
So. Why is the hair up though? I don't get that.
He's waiting for a dark moon ritual. He wants to steal the honeymoon lady.
They're gonna sacrifice her.
The shape of
She's
the
sacrifice.
Altar. Yeah, he wants to sacrifice and keep her.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that Boris Karloff has to play Bela Lugosi a game of chess for the lady.
Remember one thing I don't understand is that why does Bela Lugosi keep capitulating to the rules of Boris Karloff?
Because he had to wait for just the right moment to strike.
Why?
He said that. He just.
But that's
said,
what I'm saying. Why? Like, why is he playing along with this? And I think the reason he's doing it is because Boris Karloff knows Lugosi's weakness, which is the cat, and so all he's got to do is bring out that dang cat every time, and basically Bela Lugosi freaks out.
They didn't really explain why he's afraid of cats, did they?
He just has a superstition of phobia, which is ironic because he's a psychiatrist, right? The Bela Lugosi character is a psychiatrist, but he has a phobia of cats. So it's just supposed to be irony.
You'll notice the X-shaped altar in the satanic ceremony, which is a lot like Eyes Wide Shut or Eye of the Devil.
There is a little bit of an Eyes Wide Shut, Eye of the Devil. Yeah, I thought maybe this trailer would have a clip of it, but down there underneath the military base, which is interesting, right? In this armament underground military base is where they have the coven meeting and the lady collection. This year's collection of ladies, 2023.
He ends up getting skinned.
Yeah, they don't show any of this because I mean, just because it's pre-Hays Code doesn't mean it's going to be like Human Centipede or some nonsense. Like, they don't show any of that, but it's hinted at, and a lot of it's told through shadows, right? Like the scenes are told through shadows, right? But this is another one of those movies that basically influences every film afterwards. And I think you pointed this out because LaVey said that what was his comment about this movie? I don't remember. Why did we want to watch this?
The visuals.
Yeah, very influential visually speaking, but plot wise it's kind of goofy, and they weren't that concerned with continuity in terms of editing back in the 30s, so there's a lot of things that won't make sense and it'll jump to different things. But anyway, we got some super chats. You want to read these?
Yeah. Nicholas Johns, $10. Appreciate y'all. We appreciate you too.
Thank you, Nicholas Johns. Appreciate you.
Big Balla, $5.
Big Balla.
Can Orthodox Christians participate in the lottery?
I I don't give you moral and spiritual advice, but you're kind of dumb if you participate in the lottery because you're not gonna. It's a ripoff. But I don't think that necessarily it's inherently wrong to buy a lottery ticket. But go ask your priest.
Mickey Mouse, $5. Have you seen Italian giallo films or Italian horrors like Mario Bava's Black Sabbath? Lots of occult and satanic stuff in the Italian film industry in the 60s and 70s.
I've seen a little bit of those. I've seen obviously a lot of Dario Argento. We did a whole the Mothers of Darkness trilogy analysis, but I've not delved really deep into a lot of the Italian horror films, but maybe we should. Thank you for that, Mickey Mouse.
What is it, Trulo? $10. Thanks for all the content, hard work, Jay and Jamie. Have you seen Archive 81 on Netflix?
Yes.
Starts good, gets bad quickly, but the soundtrack is great. Has a satanic film or 1920s undercurrent.
Correct.
Like today's show theme.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I mean, I thought at first, oh, this is going to be great for an analysis. Started good, and then it just got really silly and kind of bizarre, and not in a good way bizarre. But had potential. I just didn't think it was that interesting to do an analysis of, but I appreciate that super chat.
Josh Garrett, $10. Many things can look great in B&W and definitely helps the modern audience perceive content differently. We all need to use a noir filter every now and then, especially on our Black Mirror device screen.
Yeah, I mean, there is a unique aesthetic that you can create, right, with black and white. And I definitely think, like, Black Cat is great for that. I mean, it's just so many scenes in this movie could be, like, posters. Obviously, I don't mean the lady collectors, the lady collections, but, like, every scene is lit like this. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's just definitely worth watching.
The more all the movies start to look the same with CGI and all that, the more I appreciate
exactly.
the older,
you appreciate this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Especially, like, I want to watch that Caligari because that looks...
Yeah, I mean, they're just hard to watch, some of these old ones that are not very good.
Yeah.
Some of them are hard to watch, but yeah, just fascinating lighting and contrast. Anyway, I want to remind you guys too that we will be live in LA. Go ahead and get your tickets to our event. It's going to be a lot of fun. Tickets are in the show the show description there under the Eventbrite link, with Jamie Kennedy from Scream, Jamie Kennedy from Malibu's Most Wanted, Jamie Kennedy from Jamie Kennedy Experiment. It's going to be a lot of fun. You need to get your ticket now. Don't wait until the last moment to get your ticket. It's not going to be better or cheaper waiting. Just go ahead and get your ticket there. July 6th and June 3rd and 4th, we will be in Nashville for Courtney's event, Rebels for Cause. That's this weekend, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this upcoming weekend, big event in Nashville. Jamie will be speaking. I'll be speaking. Get your ticket right here. It's a 2-day event. By the way, Chase will be there, as well as Owen S.
Rachel Wilson.
Harrison S. Rachel. There'll be a ton of people there. A lot of big name creators. A lot of people that we've done shows and interviews with. So you definitely want to get your tickets to that. And go ahead and get over to chalk.com to get access to the best supplements out there. Support the show by getting the Action 2.0 to boost your energy levels. Get the Tonkat Elite, 100% proven and peer-reviewed studies to boost testosterone. You can get the Shilajit, which is one of Jamie's favorites, that focuses your mind on clarity, right? Gives you mental clarity, mental focus. You read like crazy when you take the Shilajit. Mm-hmm. 7 Wonders, excellent for nutrient deficiency. 7 different mushrooms. All of those are over at chalk.com. CHOQ.com. That's in the show description. Use the promo code JAY50. That's JAY50. J50 to get 50% off all of those products. They also have stacks for men and for women. If you want to just go ahead and put in the promo code J53Life, you can do that for recurring subscriptions, and you got it ready coming every month. You don't have to worry about putting that information back in there. And go ahead and subscribe to our buddy over on Rockfin. Now, I want to remind you guys, too, that it's not just me and my buddy Richard Grove over on Rockfin. There's a Jamie Hancho over on Rockfin. Look at that. Look at that.
It's gonna be wild because you can say what you want on Rockfin.
Yeah, exactly. And you've already done
three
Rockfin exclusives, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. So you've done Committee of 300 book.
Mm-hmm.
You did the book by Kurt Barker.
Yep.
And then you did the LeVay thing, right?
Yep.
So go over to Rockfin and subscribe to Jamie's channel, and I'll put that in the show description right here. And also on Rockfin, you get access to tons of free content, not censored, open forum. Richard is over there. Richard's doing his Grand Theft World, right? Richard is every Sunday night, 7 hours of podcast. That's Grand Theft World. Be sure and subscribe to Richard Grove. He's one of our great buddies and co-podcasters. My philosophy course is available over there on his Autonomy Agora website. We just finished this season of tutoring. We did the last class last week. So we're totally done with that. But you can always buy the philosophy course. It's always on sale. 12 courses, 30 plus hours of lecture and video right there at the Autonomy Agora Marketplace. And we got another super chat. Rachel?
Rachel, $5. Would you be open to doing a stream with Father Zechariah Lynch, Sneck, and Father Deacon? I love Father Lynch's articles on patristic faith.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, pretty much open to any streams with people in our circles and friends group. Sure. Thank you for that, Rachel. By the way, we did a really good show with Brittany Sellner yesterday, and it's not getting that many views. I don't know if it's the algorithm or what. I did have a little bit of sound trouble at the beginning, but then it got ironed out. But we actually got into some of these same points, so about archetypes and literature and the toxifying and destroying of literature, right? And I want to remind you guys to go watch that because we did a good we had a good conversation. I'm getting tired, so my mind.
We've been streaming for like 3
time
hours.
In terms of morals. Have we really?
Yeah.
So go watch that show. It was a great show, and if you would share that. So we got into, good points about literature that nobody else talks about. I mean, who else is doing podcasts on esoteric noir films? Like, come on, we're giving you guys gold here. And I mean, I've seen the other podcasts on YouTube, dude. It's garbage city. I'm not talking about people in our circles. I'm talking about the rest of the YouTubers and podcasters out there. Don't you guys? It's like, what? Like who? What is this stuff?
I miss Jenna Marbles. I'd trade Jenna.
She's
her back
she's
and
better
a
than
1,000
all the
other
stuff that's
podcasts.
out there now.
Yeah.
Like, it's just garbage out there, right? I mean, do people not want to learn stuff? At least we're trying to give you information that nobody talks about. Learn stuff. Infotainment in the truest sense. Don't you want to learn? So get your learn on, right?
Yep.
I'm trying to get some learn up in here.